Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky went from ophthalmologist to Tea Party darling to a voice of fiscal and military restraint in the Senate. He's followed in his father Ron Paul's footsteps, promoting liberty in politics and possibly has greater national ambitions as well. Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, joins us right now. Welcome to the show, Senator Paul. Very happy to have you.
Well, thanks, Kennedy, and congrats on the new show. I hope it'll be a big success.
Well, with visitors like you, it is destined for greatness. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about the job you've got now. You are in Congress, which means you have one of the most unpopular jobs on the planet Earth. Could you possibly want to run for president so you have slightly higher approval ratings?
You know, I would just like Congress to do their job, and if Congress did their job, maybe people would appreciate us more. I heard the other day that it's been probably 40 years since we've passed the individual spending bills. Instead, we lump them all together, we lurch from deadline to deadline, and then with no time or with time running out, we pass a 2,000-page bill that nobody reads. So I think maybe our approval ratings would come up if we'd actually do our job.
It's frustrating and it's irresponsible. I know that you are a limited government person, and I've always applauded you for that. You know, in a hypothetical presidential matchup, you might be facing Jeb Bush, who has great name recognition. However, he's a big fan of Common Core. I share with you a disdain for Common Core as the parent of kids in public school and the daughter of educators. I think everything about federal standardized testing is awful. Do you think in that hypothetical matchup you could undo Jeb Bush on that single issue?
I think it's going to be tough for someone to win the Republican nomination who is for more central control of education. You know, we've had this debate in the Republican Party for a long time. When I was a kid growing up, I remember Reagan saying he was going to abolish the Department of Education. I still think we should abolish the Department of Education. I don't think our kids are any smarter or gaining more knowledge when we centralize things. Even George W. Bush, Jeb's Bush, also added to the Department of Education, doubled the size, doubled the bureaucracy through No Child Left Behind. So this will be a big debate in our party, has been a big debate. But I think it's going to be very hard for someone who's a big Common Core supporter to get the nomination. I really think that.
Well, I also think it betrays some big government leanings, which, you know, hopefully will be as dangerous to Republicans as it's been for Democrats. And I know you have to take them to task. You also have quite a hurdle against you. If you've got Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney in the race, they've got great name recognition. A lot of voters are just getting to know you. What do you think is your biggest hurdle in your march toward the presidency?
I think in some ways, if I were to do this, the more the merrier. So if you have moderates like Bush and Christie and Romney, maybe dividing up the mushy middle, maybe a conservative libertarian would have a chance. And so I think actually the more the merrier. I also think I bring something unique to the table. We haven't been able to win elections because we're not broadening the party. You know, for example, I am a big, huge advocate of privacy and that the NSA has gone too far and they shouldn't be snooping about our phone records. That attracts a lot of young people to our movement. I've been one saying the war on drugs has had a racial outcome and has disproportionately affected, you know, people of color, and that I'll fight for their rights. I'll fight for them to have a just system. I think that's going to attract new people to the party. I'm a big believer in school choice. I think that public education, some of it's good. I went to public schools. Some of them are good, but some of them aren't so good. And the people getting short end of the stick are often people who live in the big cities. I think there's great opportunity for us, but I don't think we'll get there if we nominate the same old, same old.
I agree with you completely, and that's the first time I've heard you describe yourself as a conservative libertarian. I asked your dad, is it possible for someone with a true libertarian ideology to become elected president? And he said, most likely not. Not currently. Not a true libertarian, because a true libertarian will have to actually veto bills. Is your dad right?
Well, the thing is that everybody's got these purity tests and this idea of what is a pure this or that. But the only thing you purely and 100% agree with is yourself. So we all disagree on a few issues here and there. But really, I think a libertarian or a libertarian conservative, someone who believes in the Constitution, is fiscally conservative. but at the same time believes that while national defense is very, very important, the most important thing we do, that we don't always have to be at war, that there can be somewhat of a reasonable, rational foreign policy that doesn't always have us involved in every civil war around the globe.
I'm glad you brought that up because I asked people on Twitter to submit questions for you. NH Yank, he wants to know, how would you deal with violence here and abroad if you were elected president?
I think the biggest thing is, like Hillary's war in Libya was a huge disaster. Not only are we more at risk from attacks from radical Islam because they toppled Gaddafi's government, we sent an awful message to Iran. Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons. We promised we wouldn't get rid of him, and then we did. So what kind of message does that send to Iran if they were to give up their nuclear weapons, which we want them to do? You wonder why they might be a little bit wary of that after they saw what happened to Gaddafi. So Hillary's war was a disaster in Libya. There are weapons everywhere, jihadists everywhere, but it was also a disaster on the international stage because it sent a terrible message to Iran.
All right, when do you send in troops? When do you draw the line? And what do you do with a place like Yemen?
I think the most important thing is that Congress decides this, not the president. The initiation of war, the declaration of war was explicitly given to Congress, not the president. And as a congressman or a senator, when I vote on that, I have to debate and decide, depending on the facts, on that time, in that country, and whether or not an American interest is involved. Good people can disagree on that. Some libertarians say, oh, we shouldn't go back into that really screwed up part of the world. It'll never be made right. And some, like myself, say, you know what? ISIS is now a threat to our embassy in Baghdad, to our consulate in Erbil, and all the criticism we've had rightly of Hillary Clinton for not defending the consulate. I think we should take our own advice, and yes, we should defend our consulate in Erbil and our embassy in Baghdad, but Congress still should vote. So there's a couple things. It's on how the Constitution operates, and then on the facts on whether or not an American interest is involved.
All right, let's talk about the Koch brothers a little bit. You were at their summit over the weekend in Palm Springs with Senators Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, which also gave you a chance to contrast yourself against a couple of liberty-minded fellow senators. So do you think the Koch brothers will somehow bankroll a liberty-minded president into the White House with the $1 billion that they are committing to the 2016 presidential election?
You know, I have no idea, but I think one thing that's important for all the people who bash them to know is that much of what they do is for the concept and the ideas of free markets and liberty, has nothing to do with government. And I defy any of the liberal haters that are out there to find one instance when they've ever asked for a subsidy or a special government break. I have never heard of any, and what they're wanting is to be left alone, like most businesses in our country. And I think it's horrible that people on the Democratic side have sort of vilified them just for their own personal gain.
All right, quickly, I want to hear some stats on civil forfeiture. It's something that libertarians are very concerned about. Law enforcement and government taking people's private property and profiting off of it. What legislation are you proposing?
Right now, the government can take your stuff without ever charging you or convicting you. Justice has been turned on its head. You're guilty until proven innocent. If the government takes your money, you got to hire a lawyer to prove that it was your money. So it's a crazy system. What we're saying is that you would have to be convicted for the government to take your money. You would actually have to go before a jury trial, be convicted, then the government could take your stuff. This would get rid of 99% of what they're doing. Last year alone, the government took $4 billion worth of stuff. It is just amazing. About 2 months ago in Philadelphia, a family's teenage son was selling $40 worth of illegal drugs out of the house. They confiscated and evicted the family from a $200,000 house. They took the house for $40 worth of illegal drugs. But most commonly, this is happening to poor people, often to African Americans, and often to Hispanic folks. This is something where if you really want justice for everybody, regardless of the color of the skin, civil forfeiture is a big start towards making the criminal system more just.
All right, Senator, you certainly bring some creativity and some reason to the upcoming presidential race. We've got a long way to go until then, and we'll see how this whole thing evolves. Thank you so much for sharing your time.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.